be taking questions later from the audience and from Zoom. People on Zoom who have any questions, please put them in the chat. I'd like to hear from Jeff Gressler, who will give us an introduction, I believe.
Unmute, Jeff.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Gressler. I'm president of the Little Falls Historical Society. Our normal base of operation is the nearly 200-year-old Old Bank Building Museum on South Main Street. But our museum does not have the technical capability or physical space to accommodate this evening's meeting program. So therefore, we're at Little Falls Public Library. So, on behalf of the Historical Society, Little Falls Public Library, Little Falls Central School District, My Little Falls, and our entire community, we wish to welcome everyone to this historic event here at Little Falls Public Library. Several individuals from the New York Labor History Association have traveled to Little Falls from New York City for this evening's presentation. We are most appreciative of this. This is the most unique event on a special evening for our community. The backstory for tonight's program began when Stephen Davis of the New York Labor History Association first contacted us at the Historical Society last fall with an amazing revelation and offer. His group had discovered some top quality primary source documents and materials about an 1886 labor strike here in the Mohawk Valley and actions taken by factory owners to lock out some 20,000 workers from their largely unskilled jobs in area factories. In response to these lockouts, leaders of the Knights of Labor, a prominent early American labor union, came to Little Falls, where a number of important meetings were held. Amazingly, the New York Labor History Association has obtained 2 notebooks containing detailed and extensive notes recorded during these meetings. When Stephen and Joe and Deborah asked if our Old Bank Museum would be an appropriate and permanent location for these important historic documents, we responded with a resounding yes, please. So, upon invitation, Steve and Joe and Deborah came to Little Falls late last fall and spent the day with us at the Historical Society, our members, both on tour of our mostly factory-related sites in Little Falls and a few hours researching at our museum. The personal chemistry between our 2 groups was most positive. Almost immediately, arrangements began being made for a public program in Little Falls to be presented by the New York City-based organization. Then, Little Falls' usual small-town inter-organizational cooperation between the Historical Society, the library and its staff, Little Falls Central School, and local media outlets, primarily My Little Falls, has resulted in what will prove to be this most remarkable and historic program this evening. Special thanks to head librarian Julia Yardley and her staff, middle school teacher Adam Jodway and Dave Warner of My Little Falls are extended. And also to White Rose Bakery for providing refreshments, which will be available afterwards. I now wish to introduce Stephen Davis, Board Director of the New York Labor History Association. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I'd like to introduce Joe Doyle, who's a board member of the New York State Labor History Association. He'll be...
Use your microphone, Steve.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce Joe Doyle, who's a board member of the New York State Labor History Association. I'll be introducing Erwin Yellowitz, our president.
Steve, could you hold the microphone
Yep.
for me? The New York Labor History Association was founded in 1976 to be a bridge between past and present labor unionists and academics. Keith Danish edits our newsletter and emails reviews of books on labor themes once or twice a month. Oops. We give prizes annually to outstanding labor educators and labor journalists. We give a prize for the best essay on a labor theme by an undergraduate and a graduate student. One
Closer,
additional
Steve.
prize goes to an unsung, unpaid, rank-and-file trade unionist who gives their all purely for love of the union movement. In May, for Labor History Month, we assemble a calendar publicizing lectures, museum exhibitions, and book talks about unions and working people. We lead walking tours. We march up Fifth Avenue on Labor Day. Please consider joining our association, the New York Labor History Association, and you can find us at newyorklaborhistory.org. I'm going to introduce Erwin Yellowitz. Thank you, Steve. Erwin Yellowitz got his PhD in history from Brown University. He was chair of the history department of City College of New York. He helped organize the Professional Staff Congress, a union for the faculty and professional staff of the City University of New York, and was PSC's vice president for senior colleges and then treasurer from 1972 until 1997. He was New York State United Teachers 2010 Retiree of the Year, and he's president of the New York Labor History Association. It's your turn to unmute yourself. Speak, Erwin.
Okay, Joe, thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction. And as a labor historian, it is always a pleasure to talk about the Knights of Labor, one of those organizations that was so important in its own time, but is much less well known today. But it's a fascinating organization, and I'd like to give you an overview of it before Steve Davis comments on the lockout of the 20,000. The Knights of Labor was one of those organizations where ideology and actuality clashed. The Knights were devoted in its principles to fundamental social change. It was not supposed to be a trade union devoted to the improvement of everyday conditions faced by workers. Instead, the Knights called for the end to the wage system and its replacement by a cooperative commonwealth composed of producers and consumers cooperatives. Their objectives came from American experience. This projected new world was closer to the small shop capitalism of the pre-industrial United States than to the economy of large corporations and factories increasingly in place by the 1880s. But could we turn back the clock? Not likely, then or in almost any comparable time and place. To accomplish these objectives, the Knights wanted the participation of as many people as possible. They were pioneers in inclusion. Not only white workers, but women and black workers were members. In 1886, the peak year for Knights of Labor membership, the total was 700,000, of which 50,000 were women and 60,000 were black workers. These were remarkable numbers for the late 19th century. In addition to wage workers, the Knights also enrolled small shop owners and the self-employed. In fact, they excluded only a few occupations, interesting occupations: bankers, lawyers, stockbrokers, gamblers, and liquor dealers. Everybody else could join. So this diverse membership was organized in geographic units called local assemblies. Now, a local assembly could be of mixed occupations, many were, but a good number were formed by workers in a single trade or industry. Thus, many of these locals looked surprisingly like unions. In fact, appearance was akin to actuality. The members of the Knights largely ignored the objectives of the organization and instead used it as a vehicle to defend themselves against wage cuts, poor working conditions, and long hours. They acted for their immediate needs, not for basic changes in society. In doing so, the workers acted as unions did then and now. Now, many workers entered the Knights because there was nowhere else to go. The existing unions were few, and most operated in specific trades and enrolled skilled workers. The mass of unskilled and semi-skilled workers created by the mechanization of many forms of production were excluded. Women and black workers were mostly unskilled workers and so were ignored by the unions. The unions were so exclusive because they believed only skill could allow workers successfully to contend against employers, since skilled workers could not be replaced easily. In addition, many unions feared the employment of women and black workers because they supposedly would accept lower wages and thus undercut white male workers. Thus, for many workers, the wide-open nights of labor was the only game in town. Now, some members of the Knights did form cooperatives, in total 135. They invariably failed because they lacked capital and managerial skills, plus many were ruthlessly undercut by existing businesses. Failure was to be expected, since the Knights' ideology was for an entire society based on cooperatives, not a few sprinkled into a capitalist economy. Now, the Knights' principles opposed strikes as having little long-term impact and often leading to losses that made conditions for workers worse. Strikes did nothing to further the cooperative commonwealth, which was the long-term objective of the Knights. Yet during the years 1884 to 1886, the Knights were involved in a multitude of strikes, some of major national impact. These strikes were initiated by the members without consultation with the national leadership, but the strikers had no hesitation upon calling on these national leaders for support. Several of these well-publicized strikes succeeded, and that led to a flood of new members into the Knights in 1885. The number was so enormous and so quick that the Knights could barely absorb the number of new members. Ultimately, however, several key strikes failed, and the membership quickly declined in 1886 and thereafter. Clearly, the Knights had become the organization of the members, who focused resolutely on actuality and need, and not on the cooperative commonwealth and the end of the wage system. Well, the Knights failed to attain their long-term goals, and their members failed to use strikes to better their lives significantly. Instead, the labor movement followed the policy of the growing number of trade unions. These organizations ignored the reconstruction of society and instead focused on the immediate needs of workers, the so-called pure and simple unionism of the American Federation of Labor. So the Knights of Labor did not change America, but neither did any other labor organization, then or in succeeding decades. Real change awaited events of the 1930s, World War II, a different and more powerful labor movement in the 1950s to the 1970s, and a major change in the political climate. Many of these gains have eroded since the 1980s. As with the Knights, the diverse unions in the contemporary labor movement still seek a program and a set of actions that will produce a just society for most Americans, and they still have not found it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Erwin. I'm going to introduce Steve Davis. Steve Davis majored in labor economics at NYU. He has a law degree from the University of Toledo and a Master of Laws in Labor Law from NYU Law School. He worked as a trial lawyer for the National Labor Relations Boards and served 35 years as an administrative law judge for the NLRB. Steve also taught at Fordham Law School. Steve Davis.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the students who are here. I'd like to give tremendous thanks to the Little Falls Historical Society, especially Jeff and Pat Gressler, Mike and Missy Smith, Pat Stock, Anita Dulac, and Library Director Julia Yardley. They have done excellent research in the wonderful Little Falls archives and located photos and contemporary newspaper articles about the lockout, which I have used. And thank you, Julia, for the use of this wonderful community room. Thank you, Dave Warner, for the Zoom arrangements. Thank you also to teacher Adam Jodway and his students for making this a very special presentation. Thank you to the Little Falls community. Until 6 months ago, I had never been to Little Falls. It was my loss. I came here in December with colleagues Joe and Deborah and found a beautiful historic city with wonderful, hospitable people. It has a remarkable, significant past and a fabulous future. I have a long-standing interest in labor history. Years ago, I placed an ad for Knights of Labor memorabilia. Someone replied offering 2 books about the Knights in Little Falls. The seller didn't identify where Little Falls was. I consulted some atlases. This is before the internet. And I found that 8 states had cities named Little Falls. But when I received the books, the first few pages spoke about Amsterdam and Cohoes, so I knew that Little Falls was in New York. I packed the books away and didn't look at them until my wife and I moved to smaller quarters, and I had to decide what to keep. I found a treasure, a time capsule, an archaeological discovery of the history from a personal viewpoint of Little Falls knitting mills. Employees telling this story of a historic lockout in 1886 of 20,000 workers in 50 mills in the Mohawk Valley. One book was the original minute book of the Little Falls Rockton Knights of Labor Local Assembly 3964. The minutes recorded weekly meetings from the founding of the local in 1885 to its destruction in 1888. These are the minutes of the union members who worked in the knitting mills. They detail the courageous efforts of 2,500 union members in Little Falls to fight against an enormous closure of the 6 knitting mills here and 50 others in nearby cities in 1886, which caused the lockout of 20,000 employees region-wide. I showed the students here this minute book from 1886. They were the first Little Falls residents to see this book since it left Little Falls 139 years ago. It's amazingly coincidental that the minutes were written at the exact time that this historic closure of the mills and the lockout of its employees occurred. The book describes the effects of the lockout on the union's members, their intense stress and hardship in being prevented from working, their eviction from company housing, and at the same time dealing with their arrests for picketing at the mills in protest of the lockout. It describes the steps that they and the union took to encourage solidarity among the locked out workers and resist their employers' extreme efforts to have them renounce their membership in the Knights of Labor and return to work. The minutes and contemporary news articles present a dramatic portrayal of the actions of the employers, the workers, and the union in an epic struggle for dominance by the employers and survival by the employees. The other book is a register of the names of the dozens of the union's members during that time, with the amounts they paid for initiation fees, dues, and assessments. Until now, I have legal title to these books, but I never considered myself their owner. At most, I was their steward or custodian until I could tell their story and return them after 139 years to where they belong. The Knights of Labor was the first major national union in America. It was formed in 1869. It represented 20,000 employees who worked in the 6 knitting mills in Little Falls and 50 other mills in nearby cities. All those employees were locked out of their jobs when all the mills were closed in 1886. The Knights was way ahead of its time, as we heard from Erwin Yelowitz. It opposed children under age 15 working in factories and mines. In 1890, Terence Powderly, the leader of the Knights, came to the Little Falls and spoke at the Skinner Opera House. It was reported in the Little Falls Journal and Courier, quote, Mr. Powderly appeared to manufacturers who might be disposed to hire children of tender years to consider the matter seriously. Those children should receive the advantage of the schools up to the age of 15 years at least. In the name of God and of the children, do not ask them to make money for you at the expense of their future lives. So far as Little Falls is concerned, the appeal was unnecessary, as the factory laws are well observed here, unquote. To the Zoom audience, we'll be going dark for about 5 minutes. We'll continue with the audio. Dave, would you have the lens, please? All the student narrations are from quotations of the Little Falls and other area newspapers. We have a special guest here today. She's Lizzie Murray, a farm girl from Little Falls. Would you come up, please, and bring the Knights of Labor Membership Committee? Lizzie, you time traveled 139 years to be here. You must be very tired. I must say you don't look a day over 138. Picture 1 is the original proposition for membership of the Little Falls Knights of Labor. It is not Lizzie's application. The Knights of Labor accepted skilled and unskilled workers of any occupation, but there were some occupations that it would not accept, as read by Professor Yelowitz. Lizzie, can you read the top of this proposition for membership?
No proposition can be received from a lawyer, banker, rum seller, or professional gambler.
Thank you. Lizzie, are you a lawyer, banker, rum seller, or professional gambler? No. Okay, so great, you passed the threshold for membership in the Knights. The reason is that they were deemed to be unproductive. They didn't work with their hands. They didn't do anything of value, according to the Knights of Labor. Lizzie wants to work in a mill and must become a member of the Knights of Labor first, according to the closed shop union security system then in effect. So the Knights of Labor Membership Committee will interview you now.
I want to join the Knights of Labor and work in a knitting mill.
Do you have any experience?
I knit at home on a spinning wheel. I make my own clothing. Why do you want
to work in a mill?
I want to earn some money, buy nice clothing, buy books, be able to go to a show in Albany, and have spending money on my own. There are workers' housing near the mill. I'll meet other girls and have friends. And anyway, I hate working on the farm, and I want to get away. Farm work is so hard. I'm up at dawn, I have to feed the chickens and milk the cows, tend the vegetable garden, and muck out the cow barn. And I hate my brothers.
Work in the mill is hard also. We work 6 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day, with no ventilation in the mill. Dust fibers fly around the room, and you can hardly breathe.
I work 7 days a week on the farm. The animals don't know that Sunday is the Lord's Day. I hear that there are classes I can take in the workers' housing. I love poetry and reading. I'd like to maybe go to college and be a writer or even a doctor. I need money to do that. My parents don't pay me for farm work.
Work in the mills is dangerous. There are hundreds of spinning machines going at high speeds at all times. Children have to crawl in the machines and change the bobbins while the machines are running at top speed. Some kids have lost their arm or have even been killed.
I'm not afraid. Work on a farm is dangerous too. Have you ever been kicked by a horse, gored by a bull, or bitten by a rat?
Lizzie, how old are you?
I just turned 14.
Lizzie, you're only 14. You're too young. You must be 15 to join the union and work in the mill. Keep your dreams alive and come back on your 15th birthday. We are sorry. Goodbye.
But please, please, I'll work very hard. I promise.
We are very sorry. Goodbye.
Thank you, Lizzie. Uncover the lens, please. The Knights of Labor admitted women at the Skinner Opera House proudly said, self-interest should prompt us to adopt the principle of equal pay for equal work by man or woman. The Knights also admitted people of color proudly said, quote, the outside color of a candidate shall not bar him from admission. Rather, let the coloring of his mind and heart be the test. It took 100 years from the 1869 founding of the Knights to the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1964 for there to be a national law prohibiting discrimination in employment and union membership on the basis of sex and race. Alcoholism was a major problem in that era as it affected workers and their own lives. The Knights of Labor refused membership to rum sellers, as we saw in Lizzie's application. I don't know if Powderly had a sense of humor, but he said, quote, no person can be a member of this order whose wife sells liquor. He must first either obtain a divorce from his wife or from this organization. The Knights favored arbitration over strikes. Powderly said, the suicidal policy of strikes is a relic of barbarism, nourished and fostered by capital as a means of enslaving labor, and must sooner or later give way to a cheaper way of settling differences. Sadly, but typical of the era, the minutes in Little Falls reflect prejudice against ethnic groups. According to the minutes in Little Falls in 1886, union members were fined $1 for, quote, trading with the Chinese, or, quote, taking Chinese boarders in their homes. I'd like to believe that this is not sentiment of the Little Falls residents toward Asians who may have been their neighbors and lived here for generations, but was the product of the passage of the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, prohibiting the immigration of Chinese laborers. The whole country supported that law. And an employer, according to the minutes, was spoken to regarding his employing, quote, Italian labor in preference to our men, unquote. Little Falls began the manufacture of knit goods in the 1870s. By 1880s, there were 6 mills here employing about 2,500 people. Titus Shear, who won a race for state assembly against Teddy Roosevelt, and then became a state senator, owned 2 mills here. The mills were located on the banks of the Mohawk River, drawing the power from the flow of water which drove thousands of spinning machines. Please show picture 2. On the right are pictures of the mills. There are children working there. Those are not Little Falls mills. Picture 3
We're switching that.
is Bailey Mill. Note the people hanging out the windows and sitting in front. And also note the children sitting in the front row. Picture 4.
Go a little bit slow on that because it takes several clicks to make this happen.
These are women workers at the Phoenix Mill. If the photographer asked them to smile, they couldn't or wouldn't. This is the start of their 14 to 16-hour workday, making $1 a day. Picture 5. This is the Saxony Mill. Picture 6.
You're seeing it as I put it up there for here, but then I have to share it to the Zoom crowd, so give me just a little bit of pause.
Okay, sure.
All right. Okay.
This is a picture of the Gilbert Mill taken only 6 months ago. This is the last mill that remains standing in Little Falls. It's abandoned.
That's not the Gilbert Mill. That's the Stone Mill and the Antique Center. Gilbert Mill's further down.
Okay, stand corrected, it's Stone Mill. Okay.
It's hard to tell by listening to
Picture 7.
floors of some of these buildings. So, I don't believe it, but then I but some of them
This is the Rockton Mill office. In 1886, 20,000 workers worked in 50-minute mills in Little Falls and the surrounding cities of Amsterdam, Cohoes, Hudson, Schenectady, and Waterford. The mills in those cities represented about 80% of the living mills in the U.S. There were as many here as there were in New England. In October 1886, all 6 mills in Little Falls and the 50 mills in nearby cities were closed, and all 20,000 employees locked out of their jobs by their employers. The lockout continued for 3 months, causing tremendous hardship on the workers and the economy of Little Falls and the region. The lockout destroyed the local Knights of Labor Union, which represented the workers, disrupted the lives of the locked out workers, cost the mills a tremendous loss of profit, and harmed the businesses of the area which depended on the workers as consumers. Because employees had no income, they couldn't afford to pay rent on company-owned houses. As a result, they were evicted from their homes by the mill owners. The Little Falls Journal and Courier newspaper wrote, "The lockout becomes of particular interest when it involves the thriving village of Little Falls, in which the Utica businessmen are concerned to a considerable extent. It is a serious matter to have so many suddenly thrown out of work, especially into the coming winter season. If the lockout continues for a long period, it will do great damage to the business interests of Little Falls." What caused this extraordinary closure of 50 mills and 20,000 employees? 1886 has been called the year of the Great Upheaval. In Little Falls, nearby cities, and across America, it marked an epic point in American labor history. From 1884 to 1886, a tremendous wave of labor strikes swept the country, resulting in extensive warfare between strikers and police, destruction of company property, injuries and deaths of police, strikers and strikebreakers, and causing mass destruction. Causing mass disruption in the economy and lives of Americans. It was an era of spectacular wealth by employers created by the Industrial Revolution and devastating poverty of their workers. The strikes were caused by the uprising of underpaid, overworked workers, demonstrating against the greed of work bosses of that era Employees work 12 to 14 hours per day in 6-day work weeks for $1 a day. There were no paid holidays, minimum wage, workers' compensation for injuries, overtime or health benefits that we have today. They sought higher wages, shorter hours, and safer work conditions for the adults and children who worked in the mills. Yes, children were employed because of their short stature and agility in reaching in and around the dangerous spinning machines to retrieve bobbins. Many were injured or killed. Relations between employers and workers in America, where both sides were armed, were the most violent in the Western world. In that era, socialist and anarchist organizations led these strikes and disorder. The government, the press, and the bosses all screamed that the country might at any moment descend into anarchy and violence. There were two hallmark events at that time. In 1877, a nationwide strike of railroad workers took place, shutting down the U.S. railroad system, threatening revolution. 500,000 workers walked off their jobs in the first nationwide strike in U.S. history. It was called the Great Strike and caused extensive violence throughout the country caused by class conflict. The Depression at that time caused workers to violently protest against what they considered ruthless exploitation by employers. The state militias and the U.S. Army were called in to put down these demonstrations. Citizens associated anarchism and socialism with strikes and demonstrations by the unemployed. President Cleveland called it an insurrection. 1886 was the most eventful year in the history of the U.S. labor movement since the 1877 railroad strike. On May 1st, 1886, 200,000 workers went on strike across the U.S. in support of legislation for the 8-hour workday. The Haymarket riot took place in May 1886, only 5 months before the Little Falls Lockout. A massive demonstration took place in Chicago in support of the 8-hour day. A bomb was thrown. Police officers and workers were killed. A harsh anti-union clampdown followed Haymarket. The extensive violence and strike activities alarmed the public. The vast unrest was publicized by politicians and the press. The uprising was used to discredit organized labor and stigmatize it as radical and revolutionary. Police arrested hundreds of anarchists, socialists, and labor leaders across the country. The Knights of Labor, the most powerful union of the time, having 700,000 members, was blamed, even though it was middle of the road politically, and it was not involved in the riot. The anarchist radical unions were. But the public decided that the Knights was the cause of the whole labor upheaval. The Knights of Labor in Little Falls and nearby cities was guilty by association. Despite there being no evidence of anarchism, socialism, radicalism, or improper conduct among the Little Falls employees or the Knights of Labor which represented them, the mill owners here seized on a relatively minor event, the promotion of a boy in one mill in Amsterdam closed the 50 mills in Little Falls and nearby cities and lock out thousands of workers. An employer in Amsterdam promoted a boy who worked as an unskilled worker to the position of spinner, operating a spinning machine, a skilled position represented by the Spinners Union. The Spinners Union objected to the promotion of someone who was not a member of the Spinners Union when there were spinners who were out of work. The Amsterdam Spinners Union struck, the Amsterdam Knights of Labor struck in sympathy with the co-workers, the spinners. All the mill owners seized on the Knights of Labor involvement in the strike, even though it had only involved one mill in Amsterdam, as an opportunity to destroy the Knights of Labor in all the mills, including Little Falls. A letter to the editor of the Little Falls Journal and Courier said that following the strike in Amsterdam, the Knights of Little Falls made no demand nor threatened to make any against any manufacturer. Rather, to the surprise and indignation of the public, the employers declared a war of extermination against 20,000 innocent breadwinners who had taken no part in the struggle simply because they belong to the Knights of Labor.
Sounds like
The quote continues, "Not one knight in Little Falls wanted to or did leave work until ordered to do so by their employers, for no other reason than they dared to assert the right which they possess to organize for their mutual benefit." The Knights of Labor said the Little Falls manufacturers have instigated the lockout and have opened a breach in the heretofore amicable adjustment between capital and labor. The leader said the union is determined to protect our locked out members from the cruel and uncalled for attack that has been made upon us by the employers. If they had reasons for such locking out of the people in Amsterdam, there was no reasons for such action in Little Falls. So the Zoom audience will be going on for a couple of minutes. Close the lens, please. So the students with the confrontation, please come up, the tie is sheared, and they're calling nicely their leader. Okay, tie is sheared.
My name is Titus Shear. I own 2 mills in Little Falls. The mill owners formed the Knit Goods Manufacturers Association to protect ourselves from the dictation of the Knights of Labor on the management of our business and to act in a unified way against the Knights of Labor. This matter is whether the Manufacturers Association has the privilege of running its business as it sees fit. We will not submit the control of our business and the management of our mills to anyone. We insist upon hiring and firing whom we please. We will not employ any employee who is a Knight of Labor, and if any are employed, they will be fired. Any applicant for work must produce a withdrawal card from the Knights of Labor.
I am Mayor Klein, not yet so deeply imbibed the principles of anarchism that its people are willing to consent to a reign of lawlessness.
I'm a Knights of Labor leader. We want to make social conditions better. We have no desire to import socialistic, anarchistic, or communistic doctrines. We want only pure American principles. The manufacturers are depriving labor of the power to organize. The manufacturers of Little Falls were not justified in locking out their employees as the workers made no demands and had given no cause for such action. We have determined to fight the fight to the finish. When the manufacturers have made this attack on the rights of their employees and the rights of organized labor, we will bring all the honorable powers and resources of the civilization of the 19th century to bear.
Thank you. I'm sorry, let's continue. Dave, let's continue closing the video. Thank you. So, discharge of workers, we've tied a sheet again. And workers in Knights of Labor, please come up.
You are my niece. Are you a Knight of Labor?
Uncle Titus, I am not a knight and I never was.
So I suppose you will be at work on Monday.
No.
You are fired.
All our co-workers, knights and not knights, let's leave the shop.
Gives all discharge notices to all his workers at another mill. All workers who are members of the Knights of Labor intend to remain such are fired.
Let's make spitballs of the notices and throw them around the room. We'll walk out. Fellow workers, whether you are knights or not, join us. Workers, leave jobs early. Picket signs that say unfair or workers together, or singing solidarity forever, solidarity forever, solidarity forever, in union we are strong.
Knights of Labor in driving us. Okay. That's okay, we'll skip that. Okay.
The to deprive us of the privilege which is the right of every American citizen. Every person has a right to belong to whatever order they please. There has never been any trouble in the mills in Little Falls. We have never demanded of the manufacturers any concessions of importance.
The employers try to force us to surrender through hunger. The manufacturers say in church on Sunday, give this day our daily bread, and then they lock you out so that they can get our ears. The workers will never agree to renounce our allegiance to organized labor. If we conceded the right of the employer to dictate to them what organization we might affiliate with, we fear they would soon undertake to tell us what church we should worship God in.
Thank you. As reported in the local newspapers, the National Labor Leader said if they had simply closed the doors against all operatives and not discriminated against Knights for Labor, it would have been more fair, but they have not made it a battle against organized labor in Little Falls, and we shall see who will win. We have the sentiment of the greater part of the people with us. I don't know of a manufacturing town where the operatives are better prepared to withstand the lockout. This is the best grand charge of the manufacturers, and we will resist them to the end. We will do what we can to keep the mills from running. Picture 8, please.
That's a,
It's very faint, but it's the first page of the record book, Knights of Labor, level 3964. Picture 9, please. This is one page of the minute book. One page of the minute book. Note the beautiful handwriting. It looks like John Hancock. Pen and ink. What's pen and ink? Picture 10, please. This is another picture of the minute book. The minute book has about 380 pages. Picture 11, please. This is the quarterly report of the Knights of Labor for the quarter ending January 1st, 1888. It shows 115 members at the start of the quarter, which was October 1st, 1887. During the quarter, it shows that 88 members were suspended, 20 members were reinstated as union members. As we will see in the minutes, members were suspended for, quote, being traitors to their cause and enemies of this assembly, unquote, by returning to work before they were all reinstated to work. They were reinstated in the Union after repledging their allegiance to the Knights. This is a picture of the Knights of Labor Charter, not from Little Falls. The three principles of the Knights are secrecy, obedience, and mutual assistance. Secrecy was very important to the Knights of Labor. If the workers' allegiance to the Knights was known, they feared being fired by their employers, so they insisted on secrecy. It's interesting that in the first page of the minutes, it says that the, quote, public use, for public use, the name of the organization is the Rockton Labor Club. So even to each other, they were concealing the fact that they were the Knights of Labor. For public use, the name of the organization is the Rockton Labor Club. Picture 13, please. This is a Knights of Labor mug. It pictures a bearded worker holding a hammer, shaking hands with a knife. There's one in the museum. Picture 14, please. It's a Knights of Labor bread platter. It contains etched images of a steam railroad train and a sailing ship. Picture 15. Those glass items, by the way, were manufactured in the 1880s, mid to late 1880s. There's a picture of a Knights of Labor parade ribbon. The other side was black for use at funerals of members. And the picture of the right is a portrait of Terence Powderly. There was tension in the streets as locked-out workers picketed at the mills to discourage replacement workers from taking their jobs. The minutes state that a motion was made that members of the Knights of Labor be sworn in and act as special policemen for the preservation of public order, suppression of crime, and arrest offenders against the law and under the order and direction of the police. The Little Falls newspaper editorial opposed the picketing and opposed this organization of a self-defense force. Mayor Klein of Amsterdam issued an order that people could not stand on the street in front of the mills. So instead, the pickets walked back and forth. Then the police chief ordered that no one could walk back and forth near the entrances of the mills. The pickets then increased in number 10 times. Hundreds were arrested. The police forces quadrupled and were aggressive toward the pickets. People were arrested when they innocently walked past the mill from church or were walking home. They were charged with suspicion of being pickets. The pickets used subterfuges. They walked with copies of the Amsterdam Recorder newspaper, selling them near the mills to make it appear that they were not picketing, but were only selling newspapers. Knights of Labor leader said, "We will hold accountable every man who arrests a picket, and suits for damages will be instituted against the city. We propose to find out by what right a chief of police can order the arrest of young girls on the streets." The minute book chronicled the actions taken by the Little Falls Union members in the face of the lockout in the following ways. They announced a boycott against all knit goods not bearing the union label. They posted pickets at all the mills to encourage non-union workers not to work in the mills. They asked workers who were newly recruited and those who returned to work to leave work and stand with them. They sent committees to Herkimer and Utica and met trains there from New York City and told the arriving prospective workers not to come to Little Falls and take their jobs. A secret committee was appointed to report the number of nights who returned to work, their names and place of residence and position at the Little Falls mills. Those who worked were called, quote, traitors to their cause and enemies of this assembly. They were suspended and placed in the, quote, black book for future reference. The union demanded that locked-out nights be reinstated and that the non-union workers now working be fired to make room for them. The manufacturers refused. Members renting houses to non-union workers were suspended from the union. The minutes report that, quote, 2 sister members were spoken to regarding their work in the mills. They promised to stay out of the mills until they were ordered back by the assembly, and they were reinstated in the nights. The minutes reflect a strict adherence to 1800s propriety for the Knights of Labor members. Card playing was prohibited in the Union Hall, which was called the Sanctuary of the Assembly. Any member playing the Union piano on Sunday or found to be intoxicated was fined $1. $1 was a lot of money in those days. It was a day's pay. Members were prohibited from calling members who returned to work, quote, scabs or rats. Any member found dancing with a quote scab was fined $1. Nevertheless, the employer succeeded in gradually replacing all the lockout workers and fully staffing their mills with new hires who were recruited from other cities. Also, the employer reinstated locked-out workers who agreed to renounce their membership in the Knights and who also agreed to work on the same terms as new non-union workers. The last entry in the Knights of Labor Minute Book was on May 31st, 1888. There is no evidence that the Knights of Labor continued in existence here or in nearby cities after that date. After 3 months, the mills were in full operation with no workers being members of the Knights. The end of the lockout and the disappearance of the Knights of Labor did not mean the end of the labor movement here. As described by Jeff Gressler in his excellent article, in 1912, a great textile workers' strike occurred in Little Falls, in which the industrial workers of the world, the Wobblies, an anarchistic union, vied with the American Federation of Labor to represent the workers. The strike was settled after 3 months. As in the 1912 strike, the 1886 lockout was fought by strong women who courageously resisted their employers' actions and suffered through being deprived of work, wages, and housing. Thank you to the Little Falls Historical Society and students who represented the workers and the employers and dramatized these events. It has been my great honor and privilege to present this historic period of time in Labor Falls history. Thank you. Close the lens for a minute. Close the lens for a minute. The students and Mr. John will come up with. Okay. Let's all join hands. We'll take a bow. Hands up. Take a bow. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for including them in this awesome performance. They did great. Looks like
Have a seat. So take questions from the audience and then we'll see if there are any questions in the chat. Any questions here?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the article that you quoted just at the end regarding the 1912 strike?
Yes. It's in the Little Falls Historical Society writing series, I believe, by Jeff Gressler. He spoke about, he wrote about the 1912 strike. You could look up the Little Falls Historical Society website and his article is in there. Okay. Yes.
What is in the website of, it's New York Labor?
New York Labor History
Society.
No,
History.org.
New York Labor History.org.
Okay.
It should be in the chat. Okay.
Question from the chat is, what products were made in the mills?
They spun yarn, they spun cotton into yarn, and they shipped that yarn out, I believe. The Little Falls Historical Society people may know more about that.
Yes. What else did we make?
Any other questions?
Well, there were knitted shirts, there were men's underwear, things changed over time. At one point, they made tents.
Any other questions on the chat? Okay. Thank you very much. It's been a great experience for me and for, I hope, everyone else. Thank you. So the books are here. I'm going to hand them over to